Thank you very much, and wish you a nice evening. Really happy to be here, and first of all, interested to know what do you want to hear tonight? Because I can talk about many things, and it's true that in a way he left it quite open what you are going to be interested in. So of course it's going to be somewhat related to computers. Of course it's going to be related somewhat to Silicon Valley and to Switzerland, because that's the two places in the world that I try to connect with my organization. But pretty much we can steer the conversation into many directions. I have actually 4 or 5 slide presentations in the back that I could take out if ever you want to go that way or go that way. So who is a student? Let's start with a student. What do you like? I mean, I hope you are one. What would you like to hear?
I'm not sure.
That's tough. I was expecting another question, actually, but okay, we'll come back to that.
I will shut up now.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Let's make it fun. Anyone?
Well, I don't know whether it's relevant or not, but the last time we were in Switzerland, we spent the last night before we left with some friends. Mm-hmm. And when I got to the airport, they asked me where I had spent last night, and I didn't mention a hotel. I said we'd spent the night with friends. We got the 3rd degree from exit security. I think they were assuming that nobody in Switzerland would be friends with Americans.
Well, that might be assumed. It's actually not true. Because, and I might answer right away, because one of the things that people don't know is that Switzerland is actually very much copied on the US. We actually copied your constitution when we wrote our last version, 1848. Excuse me?
They made it a confederation, not a
we made
federation.
it a confederation, exactly. But there is much more similarities, and there's actually differences in the way that people run the country, the way they think about the role of government, for instance, in society and all that. And, yes, they're a little bit more critical than Americans, so they like to bash whatever, But actually behind the bashing, there's much more love than you might think. Well, if there's no pressing need, I'm going to just go ahead, and feel free to interrupt me. I would really like that to be as interactive as possible, since otherwise if I just speak to myself and nobody answers, it's going to be boring. So that was the title that I chose, because they told me, well, you have to talk about something really, computerish. And I said, well, what can I really do in computer science, not being a computer scientist, that is of interest to people that probably know much more than I do. So I chose this complicated title, and it's intentional that it's complicated, because the idea is that it's a conversation starter between you and me. And there's actually one subject in there that I thought you'd ask me about. So I already lost my first sort of pun, is that you would ask me about chocolate, because I'm not going to talk about chocolate. I'm really sorry. But I can explain the interaction between chocolate and computer science. That's for sure. So first of all, I'm from swissnex. I've created swissnex, 15 years ago? It's an organization up in San Francisco that basically has the goal to connect 2 regions, namely, in our case, the western part of North America and Switzerland. There's 4 other Swissnexes around the world right now. There's one in Boston, there's in Shanghai for China, there is Bangalore for India, and there's Rio with an antenna in Sao Paulo for Brazil. And we were really the leaders in building that thing. And what we do, so we connect 2 regions, but what we connect is people. At the end, everything, including technology, is people. And we connect people with a certain goal in mind and in a specific sector. We are active anywhere between the idea and the product. As soon as an idea becomes a commercial activity, and nothing against commercial activities, it's just not our competences anymore. We hand it over to somebody else. So in a way, we start with basic science. We then see, when science becomes something that you can communicate, and that might be to students, so that's education. So we work with the higher education sector a lot. when people maybe, and often actually in the higher education sector, make startups out of ideas, and then maybe even we work with large companies, again, when it's in the field of the ideas. Basically, it's not how to sell a product, an existing product, it's look at what is cooking in the garages of Silicon Valley in our case, garages or wherever, backyards, and that might have an impact on your business in the future. And we also talk to the society at large, because, and that's maybe, I hope you agree with me, that's maybe one thing we forget sometimes too much here in Silicon Valley. I've been living here for 20 years, I really love the place. But one of the things I realize here compared to in particular Europe and in particular France, because that's what they're really good at, is there is not a lot of debate about the impact of technology. In France, it's the opposite. They talk only, I mean, I'm sorry, I have lots of French friends, so don't mind, but they mostly talk about the impact and sometimes forget to do the technology. Although this is not very true, because actually there's fantastic technology in Switzerland as well. So swissnex, it's in a wonderful place. We just moved, we just reinvented in a way the model of what we want to be. So what you see on the top here, and there's somewhere a button. So this is downtown San Francisco. This is the Exploratorium, for those who have been up there. And we are in the pier just next to the Exploratorium. And these are some pictures from the inside, here and here. That's the end of the pier, and we have this magnificent garage door, which in Palo Alto would really be useful. In San Francisco, a bit less, because there's probably maybe 3.5 days of warm weather a year. So, but so you see, we created a place that we want to be inspiring, where we want to have conversations, where we want to have exchange. And what do we do in there to make it a little bit more concrete for you? Any questions so far? No? Yes? No?
The canonical Palo Alto garage did not have a view. There are many quote, inspirational songs, works of art, etc. Most of them were created in isolation with a view of a brick wall at best. Yet we often build these technology places hoping to inspire people that are beautiful. And why the disconnect between theory and practice?
How much time do you give? No, I mean,
It's 8 a.m. tomorrow morning.
yeah, I mean, it's of course a good point. And it's partly different in different cultures, you know. There are working conditions in some of the Silicon Valley companies, even though the companies are iconic, that people in Europe would never accept, for instance. So if we think about European people that work with us, and that's sort of half of our folks, you know. If they come to San Francisco, if we want to convince them that they should really do something here, since it's really far away, it's about 12-hour flight, and it's about it's actually not about, it's exactly 9-hour time difference. So if we want them to have a level of stickiness for the Silicon Valley, we cannot only show them the great ideas that are cooking in the garages. We have also to show them, hey, that we are something really different here for them. And even for Americans, I have to say that already in our previous location, which was one of the oldest buildings in San Francisco, in 1850 brick and timber building, I realized how much value there is in the environment, in the space, in the envelope. Because at the end, what do you remember? You remember where it happened and with whom it was, if the person has a nice, interesting conversation with you. And so the stickiness, if you want, of a place is truly important. And so, well, actually, the fact that we have that great view, that was not intentional. It came with an empty pier, so which we had to build out. But I have to say that what is more important in a way is the empty spaces. You know, is these huge spaces that with a lot of space, a lot of light, a lot of unfinished options. There is no seating arrangements. You come in and you build the place where you work, where you sit, where you have a conversation. We have no desks that are attributed to someone. People just choose them. And I mean, that's not something new, but that for Switzerland, that's something new though. And so what we do in there is that there's not only swissnex, the team of swissnex, and I'm going to tell you what we do, but there's about, in total, there's 75 workspaces, and we have about 50 people in there that are not from swissnex. They are other organizations that work between Switzerland and the US, and that are around the ideas of innovation. So if you want to get all these people together to exchange, to talk, to come up with ideas, to share, and maybe to collaborate, you have to add something. That can be free chocolate, but that helps. But it actually also is the place, and I'm a strong believer in that. That's why there's actually architects, and I think why architects think about inspiring places. So what do we do quickly? So we have sort of a four-step process. The first one is clear that we try to connect people. That's the first thing that's needed. Is so we offer people on one side or the other, ways to meet others that they don't know, and a landing strip, if you want, or landing place, temporary or long term, so that they can start the outreach to others. And of course, we have to be welcoming. We have to give them also some guidance in just knowing how you talk to the other side. A simple thing. You all have seen US, or let's say Silicon Valley slide decks from startups. They start always with how much money they're going to make. In Switzerland, that's the last slide. You start with the history, start with your engineers, you start with the technology, and at the very end, you dare to say how much money you make. If you come with a slide deck like that in front of an American VC, I mean, you're just out, because after 2 slides, he says, okay, so next, So it's I'm not saying one is better than the other, but that's the type of things, the subtleties that we have to know. So the connect is the very first part. Then with the people together, what we do is we explore. We try to find something that they did not know. Something that is completely out of their comfort zone. And for that, Silicon Valley is absolutely fantastic. Because where in the world can you find a guy who has studied computer science, who one day wakes up, takes a shower and says, oh, I'm going to build an electric car. And knows nothing about electric cars. And then a few years later says, well, I'm going to just build a rocket. I mean, in Switzerland or in Europe or in most countries in the world, people would say, well, what do you know about that field? I mean, how credible are you? And here you can be doing whatever, start whatever and including swissnex, by the way, and you're always going to find people who say, it's a crazy idea, but I like it and I'm going to help you. And I know someone that I met at the barbecue the other night and that you should meet as well. That's sort of how it works here. So the exploring together is about exploring not what the people know already, that part. It's exploring this part here. It's if you are a Nestle, for instance, which is one of the residents that has offices in our space, you know the people in the food business. But you don't need you don't know the mechanical engineers coming out of NASA that built a huge food incubator on on Treasure Island, sorry. You don't meet these guys. You don't think about these folks. So that's where we are good at, because we work in so many different fields. Because we have that transversality, and because we like the craziness. You know that the city of San Francisco has actually a chief innovation officer. And I once asked him, so what's the success factors for the Bay Area, for San Francisco? And said there's only 2 things that you have to do. The first one is you celebrate success. So if someone is successful, make a big thing out of it, because that's going to encourage the person that may have the success and will show it to others. And the other thing, which I thought is even stronger, is embrace deviance. If you think about it, that's actually pretty cool. And that's actually, by the way, that's a person coming, I think one of the dangers that San Francisco is entering into, is that we don't have enough deviants anymore because they can't live there. Let's close the bracket. So we explore together, and then we start to enter in some sort of collaboration. And the collaboration can be crazy collaboration, can be truly about an artist trying to explain to a robot builder what he or she as an artist envisages that a robot should do. And then the guy from the robots suddenly realizes, okay, well, it's not only about electrical engineering and computer and AI and visual and all. There's actually an interaction with a human at one point. And that human is maybe not only an engineer working in a car company, it could be anyone. And it can open these really great fields of interesting things. And of course, at the end, what we hope is that people are transformed by that exchange, is that they realize, hey, there is something else out there. We're going to do something about it. And ideally, that would be some sort of cooperation so that we take the best of both places. So this is, in a few words, what swissnex does. Of course, we do a lot with IT because that's one of the strengths of the Bay Area. Any questions at this point? Nope. Yes? That's the $1 million question. No, it's really an interesting question, and I mean it in a good sense of the word. Because in a way what we do is we are so early in the process, that putting an ROI is actually damn difficult. And that has been my challenge since 15 years, is to convince people that it's worth investing into something that might lead to something in 6 months, 2 years, 5 years. That might lead people to think about consequences of technologies or developments. But what's the value of that? And I have a few examples later on to say about that. But the mission, let's say in general, is to really connect the two areas in these fields and to try to help both sides to grow together. Please.
So 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, a lot of times I hear like, oh, okay, what's the end state for like a company? A lot of times being bought by a larger company. Is this a kind of thing where kind of the end state doesn't exist and it's like this is always going to be something?
You mean swissnex as an organization? Yeah. So first of all, and thank you for mentioning that because I forgot to say, so we are not a company. We are actually a public-private partnership. We get about a third of our budget directly from the Swiss government, and the rest we make the money by services or other means. So we are a mix between a company and a public organization. So yes, we are in a constant flux, and in a way, that's at the same time the really, really interesting part of our job, but also the tough one is that as soon as something becomes too comfortable, we have to go away. We have to go into the next thing. And there have been many iterations of swissnex already. But as long as we stay, ahead, as long as we are a little bit annoying to everyone, I pretend that we play our role. And that also, it's also linked, so this sentence that comes from Douglas Adams, you probably know him, that's the guy who wrote the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I like this quote, because I think it applies to the organization, it applies to all of us at the organization, and it applies hopefully also to the people that we work with. Because again, if someone comes to here or someone goes from here to Switzerland and knows exactly what they want, there's not much we can help. There's not much added value. But what we can help them is to go to a place where they didn't know that they have to be, but where they're happy to be at the end. So with this philosophical thing, let me jump over to some more concrete things. I promised I will talk a little bit about computers and about the links between the two cultures. And that's quite important because, again, it's about people and it's a good example of connections. It's probably the best example of connections I know between Switzerland and the US. You probably all know, since you have studied computers, that the mouse is said to have been invented by Doug Engelbart and his colleague from SRI here in the Bay Area. Well, there were other things before, but they were all classified. So the first public mouse was Doug's mouse. And that's the one on the upper left corner. On the other side of the ocean, in Zurich, at the ETH in Zurich, you have this gentleman that you see in the upper right corner, named Niklas Wirth. He was a very brilliant computer scientist. He invented a bunch of computer languages, Pascal, a version of Algol, and a couple of others, Oberon, and Modular, exactly.
Very influential languages.
Thank you. I mean, you had probably more appreciation for the details of the languages, but I just know him as an individual. He once came, and that's, I think, where we met, huh? Eugene, 1999, when we did that great event of all these people coming together at the Computer Science History Museum. And so this guy came over and did a sabbatical at Xerox PARC. And he had started working on his own computer, saw the Alto, that was at the Xerox PARC, and wanted to bring Action Alto back to Switzerland, but the Americans didn't let him do it. So he went back, and as a good computer scientist, he decided that he's going to build his own, and that's the Lilith, the small one that you see on the left there. And then he also saw at Xerox PARC, he saw the mouse and said, that's a cool thing. I need an interface to my Lilith computer. And again, because he wasn't able to take the mouse with him, he actually said, I'm going to build my mouse, but he was a computer scientist, not a micro-technology engineer or something like that. And so what he did, logically, he went to the sister organization of ETH Zurich, which is the ETH in Lausanne, so the Institute of Technology, went to a professor in micro-technology and said, can you build me a mouse? Here is some drawings, from Doug, and Doug was, of course, okay with it. And so they built this mouse, the red one. And what they did is completely crazy, is because actually they gave the whole job to a watch manufacturing company. Because they thought it's small, it has to be precise, it has to be the same each time you build one. So in a way, that's what we know how to do. It's a watch on wheels. And so they built that thing, and of course the watch company does not understand a thing about marketing to the masses. And that's why, even though the real first commercial mouse was built in Switzerland, it actually never became a business. Except that a company that was doing software at the time, and it's called Logitech, saw the mouse as a tool that they could use they had a drawing software they were developing at the time, and they used the mouse and they took it over. And Logitech is actually a Swiss company, although their biggest research center is down here in Fremont. And that's the fourth mouse down there. So it's a nice story in a way, it's here, there, here, there. So it's going back and forth, and it's introducing into a project people from so many different sectors to make something that we basically can't live without anymore. I mean, of course, now you have trackpads, but still. So that's a nice story.
Neither was the Lilith.
Sorry?
The Lilith never became a product.
Absolutely, and I mean, the guy who built the mouse at EPFL, Jean-Claude Nicou, he also had an own computer line called the Smacky. And by the way, if you want to see all these machines, the Computer History Museum is a wonderful place. Really, I can only encourage you. And you can see all these machines there, including the Smacky. And it's the same thing. I mean, they just built it, and they never thought, and that's a big difference between America and here. They never thought about making a business out of it, or maybe just a few hundreds of machines, but they didn't think right away of the world.
Obviously, the wrong Swiss watch manufacturer. They should have gone with Swatch.
Well, at the time, Swatch was not yet invented, though. But so that's one example of where I think that the internationality can really play an interesting role. That's something completely different, this one. Have you ever heard of that project? The Random Darkbot Shopper. I'm sure you all have heard about the darknet. Well, there's actually a few of them, it seems, or at least there's a few interfaces to them. And this is a group of media artists that decided to make it visible. So they built all these boxes you see around the wall in a museum, and all the boxes were empty. They programmed a bot, a piece of software, and told the software, go onto the darknet, and every week buy something randomly, you decide randomly for less than $100. And each week, they got the stuff shipped physically into the museum, and it filled one of these boxes. And so it bought all types of things. Of course, fake Nikes and fake passports and weapons. And one day, it got a box of ecstasy. And the attorney general of the region there indicted the bot because it's not legal ecstasy in Switzerland. Because he wanted to make a case out of it. Actually, he loved the exhibit, but he thought this is an interesting point in the evolution of technology.
Shouldn't he have jailed the programmers, though?
They didn't say that the bot should buy ecstasy. They gave this piece of software the right to choose randomly what they do.
Sure, that's well understood that someone wrote the code. Have a rand function, use a credit card to buy the thing, but at the end, you still have a human agent.
Yeah, I mean, the point was to start a debate about that, you know. And again, these are artists, you know, these are not computer science. But I thought just to show that this is something that is also important for us here, you know, and that we should think about, you know, what becomes the responsibility for, I mean, what's the responsibility of the Twitter programmers for the fake tweets that came out recently? You know, is it, I mean, who is responsible for it? And you know that there have been many cases even for big tech companies about this type of things. Yes?
Responsible fix the bug.
Yeah. Okay, please.
So has there actually been any progress on that? Like, did it actually ever go to trial, or is it still sitting somewhere? Are they trying to find a way for the program itself to communicate with the court-appointed lawyer to defend the program?
Electronic lawyers?
So
that would be AI at that point.
No, so it ended a little bit differently. First of all, there was a finite number of boxes. So by the time, if you want, the trial or whatever that was, you know, really started, all the boxes were filled and the experiment, the art installation was done. They have repeated it since in a number of other cities as well. But that thing was over, and so that's 1.1. Point two, what they decided is ecstasy is illegal, and therefore the museum actually gave the ecstasy to the police, which destroyed it. So there was no bad things anymore done with it. And then it started a debate, a public debate, and that's actually what the attorney wanted. He didn't want to indict the bot. He wanted that we start talking about it.
Is there anything like self-driving cars, that kind of stuff? Is there any big like AI presence in Switzerland right now? In the sense that, like, for example, right now in Mountain View, there are Waymo cars driving around. Is there anything like that going on over there right now?
Yeah. Actually, the equivalent of the United States Postal Service in Switzerland actually plays with not only self-driving mail cars, but actually even with distributed mail by flying robots, by drones. So in some senses, actually, there is more stuff happening at the consumer's level. In some cases, in Switzerland, than there is actually here, interestingly enough. And that brings me to a good point, because I mean, you give me the segue. I mean, I don't know if you know it, but Google's biggest research lab outside of the US is in Zurich. Right now it's 2,000 people. This morning, I actually have the article with me. They announced they want to move to 5,000 people. 5,000 people.
Can you compare and contrast Google versus what you're doing? I know there's some, but I see some similarities between them.
Between what and what, sorry?
Google also tried an American approach
Yes.
in Switzerland, which
Yes.
is sort of what you're doing. But can you compare and contrast your company with Google in Zurich? Because Google in Zurich is supposed to be very different from Switzerland, but even from the US. Also the layout, for instance, of their similar thoughts as you have.
Yeah, of course they have tried to import, but I mean that in a good sense of the word, the more easygoing style of Silicon Valley into a more rigid Zurich. Zurich is, in Switzerland at least, not seen as a very cool, flexible place, although it's probably the most interesting city in Switzerland. But it's more like, the more tie and coat things. So I mean, Google is going to have 5,000 people over there. IBM has a big research lab there since I think the end of the 50s even.
Yep.
Long time. Cisco has several labs in Switzerland. Facebook has just opened. There's stories about the secret Apple lab in Switzerland. Rumors, even in that article that I got this morning. There's a plenty of even of the local of the American companies that are over there, and so AI is clearly a strong field in Switzerland, and we have worked with many of these projects. For instance, virtual reality. I think we have better virtual reality projects in Switzerland than we have here in the US. We've been invited 3 years in a row to Sundance as the example of the use of virtual reality in the entertainment sector with Swiss projects. Of course, I mean, the Oculus was developed here, but then it's what do you do with it? That's the difference. Yes, please.
Why would a young entrepreneur choose Zurich over, say, Silicon Valley to learn about new ideas, to cultivate relationships if they want to eventually build a business versus, say, Zurich?
Why here versus there, or what?
Why would they choose Zurich? It feels like Zurich.
The cheese. No. But it's a very fair question. And I'm not here to do economic promotion for Switzerland, but I'm still going to share with you what I think is some of the advantages. I mean, Zurich is a small city. It's about as big as San Francisco, actually, as the city of San Francisco. But we all speak 4 languages, at least. Well, let's say 3 or more. In 2 hours by train, not by car, or let's say 3. You're in Munich, you're in Stuttgart, you're in Paris, you're in Milan, you're in Lyon. You can't be closer and more international anywhere in Europe, I guess, than in Switzerland. Excuse me? Yeah.
But if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm not going to be traveling all the time. I'll be probably working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. So it feels like more you want that.
That's a good point, but there's actually more than the train. Okay. Just some statistics, Switzerland is consistently over the last 10 years number 1, 2, or 3 in all the rankings for innovation. Whatever the ranking is. We have one of the biggest portion of our budget as a country, not the taxpayers' money, but the global GDP that is invested in R&D. Most of that actually by the private sector, not by the government. But still, it's a huge amount. Our universities are incredibly well ranked. EPFL, the one in Lausanne, just was nominated as the best university worldwide among the universities that are less than 50 or 20 years old, something like that, so the young universities. We have in Switzerland, per capita, more Nobel laureates and more patents than any other country in the world. So despite the cliche, or behind the cliche of the cows, the cheese, the Swiss Army knives, and whatever else, and the banks, there's actually an incredible density for that stuff. And then there's another thing that's very valuable for companies, and that is true for all types of sectors. Even car manufacturers in Europe, they always roll out their new cars in Switzerland first, because people are very picky, and they can afford it. But they are picky. They are really picky. So if it doesn't work in Switzerland, that's a very bad sign for your product. So there's these reasons, and probably dozens more. If you want more, we can have a private conversation. But I think there's more behind the cliche. And let me just show you another one. That's actually interesting, yeah. That should actually start. Let me see if I can do that. Do you know this company? Do you know that Disney has its biggest research lab outside of the US in Zurich? And what they do there is the interaction between computers and images mostly. And this company here called FaceShift, which by the way we happily accelerated in our accelerator at swissnex, but since we're not allowed to take any equity, we did miss out on the exit, was bought for an undisclosed amount by Apple. And so what they do is, and this is real time, they use a Kinect, a simple Kinect, they film your face, and they can animate any image, artificial image. That could be Shrek on the right, or it could be whatever else. It could be a boat or a car that talks. And so their biggest market is, of course, the whole entertainment industry. This is again interesting, you know. Disney coming to Zurich. And there is a cross-pollination, incredibly cross-pollination. Another example, well, you alluded to it, the World Wide Web. That's actually the cover of Tim Berners-Lee's document, first document in which he explains what the web is. The World Wide Web was invented by rocket scientists, well, not rocket, I mean, particle physicists at CERN for a fantastic idea, which is just let's find a way to make sense out of these huge amounts of data. And in a way, that's another interesting story because it started over there in Geneva in a lab that is actually not Swiss, it's an international lab. You know, it's what used to be called the European Lab for particle research. It was invented by an Englishman. Actually, it's really in the US that it became worldwide. And now it has become, again, an international problem, if I may say so. Because in a way, it was not conceived for what it is used today. It's a completely different story to create something that is just linking a bunch of scientists in basements and you know, shack labs to exchange information among themselves. It's a completely different story to do that and to just take the tool, copy, paste, and open it to everyone in the world. And many of the problems, and you know that better than I do, many of the problems nowadays with the web are linked to the fact that nobody thought about what it will be used for when it became public. And so I think here again there is a joint responsibility that we all can share, and Switzerland in a way is also participating in that since we have so many international organizations in Geneva, and there's actually a strong movement right now to create a new type of forum for a new way of governing the internet. And I think that's another role that Switzerland can bring back to something that has obviously moved to the US. Another example. I'm more about the society again, where we can help. Who knows what Ashley Madison is?
As a computer security guy.
You don't have to say me if you used it, but...
No, as a computer security guy, I know that they were brutally hacked.
Yeah, so Ashley Madison is a Canadian company, if I'm right, that basically encouraged mostly male members to do things outside the marriage. And they were hacked. And what most people saw from the hack is that, oh, this guy also was a member. But the real interesting thing in there is that, and I take the example of Paris, that's why it's actually in French. It's an exhibit that we co-created in France. Out of the 66,000 members of Ashley Madison just in the city of Paris, there were exactly, I believe, 46 women. And none of them was real. Zero. These were all fake personas.
How many of the men were fake?
Probably not many. I would guess not so many. So, I mean, this is an art exhibit. We'll actually bring it to San Francisco. So if you come to swissnex sort of in the summer.
The worst thing was a lot of these segmented users were coming from .gov, .mil addresses. They were using their official addresses to get on the site. So for the life of me, beyond the moral degradation and deprivation that they were exhibiting, was the sheer foolishness that some of these people are holding extremely important posts in the country, and they're just using their official addresses for using the site.
Yeah, I mean, that's being plain stupid in a way.
Yes. That's one of them.
In a way, it shows how stupid people can be.
But which computers, do people look at your history on more often? Your home computer or your work computer?
Well, the fact that they signed up using their .gov and .mil email addresses.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Yeah, but
that's,
then you're assuming one opponent. Assume two opponents and solve for which problem you want to have.
Although even when I read up on this, I'm not sure that there was much confirmation that was needed before making an entry in the registration database anyway. So you could just register somebody else's email address, which if you're thinking of .gov and .mil emails would be a thing for an opponent of some sort to do.
So there's actually two issues in that whole Ashley Madison thing. There's of course the one about is it .gov or .mil, and is it fair that so many men try to bypass marital relations and all that. But that's not the one that we are trying to approach with that exercise and with these artists, because the interesting story in that is if so many humans, and we can guess that although they were stupid, maybe using their professional email address, but I mean we can say that everyone is so stupid. If so many men actually fell, let's say not in love, but let's say into a relationship with avatars, with bots, and they all had names, they all had addresses, they all had a personal history, you could actually pinpoint them on a map. So there is a map of all the fake women in Ashley Madison living in Paris. The map exists, and it's part of the exhibit. But that asks really fundamental questions. We think that it's gonna be frightening, the interaction we're gonna have with robots in 10 years. But the problem is already here. We've already been fooled in a way, and that again that's one of the things that we try to do, and that Switzerland also tries to bring up as a country. As part of a bigger conversation is, well, where are we in relationship with technology? Another one, everyone is a humanitarian. It's a good example. You know that we have a number of high-level international organizations in Geneva. One of them is in particular the International Committee for the Red Cross. So an organization that has been going out into the zones of conflicts since 1915, I believe, when they were founded. It is very often the very last organization that leaves a conflict zone. It's very often the last organization that goes and sees people in the most impossible prisons, in the most remote places. The interesting thing is that if you go and visit someone that has been, really nearly dying in a prison somewhere in the jungle, wherever, for 10 years, if this person comes out of prison, takes power, starts a guerrilla or whatever, the person might be as bad, but will always remember that you, the ICRC, were the only organization that came to help them or to visit. So that's why they were so successful for so many years to go into all these zones where all the others couldn't go, didn't dare to go anymore. Now think just a second what the cell phone did to all that. Would ISIS be the same if we didn't have the smartphone, if we didn't have Facebook, if we didn't have Google, if we didn't have other social media? I would bet that it would be different. And that's actually what the president of the ICRC always says. It says, the modern communication technologies, they are the biggest blessing and at the same time the biggest curse. So the question of what is our responsibility as engineers, as computer scientists, as technology companies. 25 years ago, you could have said, okay, there's a terrible war, I just give 20 grand or whatever to the ICRC or Médecins Sans Frontières or whatever other organizations, and sort of, I've done what I can do. Because I'm not part of the problem, or only very remotely, even though, I mean, you could even argue that even 50 years ago, you know, humans at the end were always part of the problem. But it was sort of more remote. Nowadays, if you work at Google as an engineer, as a simple engineer, as number 2564, you cannot say anymore that you're not part of the problem of the war in Syria right now. I'm not saying that, that we should blame them for that. But what it means is that the international organizations and these large companies and everyone here has to feel more responsible for what's happening. And there has to be a stronger partnership between these different worlds. And that's, again, something where Switzerland can help, of course. Please.
I think there's two things that I wanted to ask, one of which is tying in with the question that Nick just posed a bit before. As an entrepreneur, particularly as someone who's at the early stages of prototyping an idea, how does, say, Switzerland or Zurich offer a differential in terms of access to, say, capital? Is there a culture similar to what we have here where you have a lot of people who are looking to invest in new technologies? Or is that something still wiser to do here once you have something running, then explore Switzerland for the next steps?
There's a number of answers to that question. The first one is there is plenty of money in Switzerland.
Yes, that we know.
Well, it's partly a cliche, by the way, because it's not the same type of money. What we don't have is really smart money. You know, there's enough of it, but there's not enough people that know what to do with it. In particular, in the sector of high tech, of growth companies and all that, there's lots of people who know how to do the private banking, you know, and the family offices and not that type of stuff. But even there, the Silicon Valley is a challenge to them, because here you have people, they have studied, I don't know, biotech, and one morning they wake up under the shower and they say, I'm going to reinvent the money. And there won't be money anymore, and we can get rid of credit cards, you know, or whatever, you know. Or maybe it was a cook who had the idea, or a taxi driver, or whatever. And of course, these are not the people that you have on the radar screen. So yes, there is a lot of money. No, there is not as much smart money as in Silicon Valley. There's probably no other place in the world where there's that much smart money. And there is not, and that's the same for the rest of the world, I guess that's why Silicon Valley is so attractive, there is not the ecosystem at that size that gives the entrepreneur everything that he or she needs in a radius of about 100, well, let's say 50 miles. You know?
For me, it's like 15 minutes from my house.
Yeah. I mean, no, you don't have that. But and of course, what you don't have either, nowhere else in the world, is a market, basically with only one norm and one language and one everything, with 70 million people. But what you have in Europe is the rest of the world. Now, you can also say, hey, the biggest market is the US, is 370, but there is still something like 7 billion, 0.2
Here's China, it's a pretty big market.
somewhere else, you know? And that's something, and I really don't want to, I just want to make a point there. Because I've been living here for 20 years, and I know very much how it is, how you feel here. When you live here all the time, you have the impression, well, what we develop here, it has to be so good that everyone in the world wants it. But that's BS. That just is BS, you know?
So the second part of that question is,
yes.
So you clarified that it's still probably a good thing to get your first stage here. But moving that question forward, let's assume I got the first stage done right, we got a bit of capital. I just read something today where they're saying that the quality of AI and machine learning engineers that are coming from Europe are at a very world-class level, probably better than what's coming out from now. What's the appetite of risk within people who are looking for new opportunities? So they don't go to, say, the Google lab or whatever, but they want to try out the new, unknown, relatively black box American company or other company that's just set up shop in Switzerland. Is it how the people geared? Are they risk averse?
They lag behind Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
But frankly, drive 30 miles out of the Silicon Valley? Well, no, maybe more. Let's say Fresno. And I have nothing against Fresno, but how is the attitude in Fresno towards risk?
Worse than Zurich.
You know, I mean, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying anyone is bad in the whole exercise. What I'm saying is that we are so unique here that we don't realize anymore that there's 7 point whatever number of billion people that are different. And so in that sense, yes, if you want to start a company, if you want to have quick access to very smart money, if you want to have all the infrastructure around you, you can do it here. The best engineers are not here, and certainly not the cheapest. You know, just as an example, an average student coming out of an ETH in Switzerland with a bachelor has the level of a master's student here. It's at the PhD level where actually American universities really become the top one. So, you know, it's not as simple as black and white. And the answer is there is probably not one single place where you can do it. And it's probably not one single place where you should do it, because if you think about the global market, you have to know what's happening somewhere else as well. So when we help startups, Swiss startups, we often tell them keep engineering in Switzerland, but bring the marketing over here. And bring one C-level person over here, because if you want to have investment from American companies or American VCs, well, they don't invest into someone usually that is 12 hours airplane away. That's what Israel does, by the way, is very well. Yes?
Is the venture capital money here smart, or is it 3-year force feed, grow fast or die money?
Well, isn't that what VC is about everywhere?
Yes.
What makes you think that's not smart?
For whom?
That's what they think. What's your evaluation function?
That's why Larry and Sergey did all the early stage risky stuff of booting off Stanford, and then they went to the VCs later on, right? So use the university jump off. Be very nice to your professors, basically.
So don't discount Switzerland. Again, I have no vested interest. You know, I don't get a percentage if you move there, so just be reassured. But I think it's clever to have a second leg on which you stand. And that second leg doesn't have to be in Switzerland, but since I'm from there, I just encourage you slightly to go there. And I might be able to bribe you a little bit later on.
You could say take a vacation there.
Or take a vacation, yeah, whatever. So I just want to come back to that because that's also interesting. So not only is it the picture of a whole exhibition and series of events that we're going to start at swissnex, actually at the end of next week, but it shows two things. There's, if you see it, there's on the top right up there, there's a drone. And this here, actually, by the way, that's an idea by Norman Foster, Sir Norman Foster, a famous British architect, of creating drone ports in Africa, and with the idea that so many issues that are linked to poor transportation could be solved by drones.
Where in Africa is this?
For now, nowhere. For now, it's just a drawing. It's a rendering. It doesn't really exist. But I think the idea is to start in Rwanda, I believe. But the point what I wanted to make is that, do you know that the best drones, and I don't talk about the military drones, they're not built in Silicon Valley. They're not built in the US. They actually come from Europe. If you want really specialized drones, and by the way, a number of the researchers developing these drones are American. But if you go to a university like EPFL or ETH, just to make again a little bit more publicity, if you come as a prof, you get a huge amount of money to start your lab. You can actually really do research. because in Europe we still have that tradition that a university has to be funded mostly and often by the government with enough money so that the researchers can do what they're supposed to do, which is research, and not spend so much time on the fundraising. Yep, exactly. And you know, it's just a fact that I've observed. You know, there's a number of, I mean, there's plenty of American professors in Switzerland that are there because they have actually more time to do research. A university like EPFL, its faculty is about 70% non-Swiss, just to give you an idea. Students, about half. What else do I have for you in there? The end. It's the end, or whatever you want it to be. It's just to say that I didn't give you any specific details about the newest technology that's going to do whatever, because that's not my field. I'm just a plasma physicist. But I hope I gave you an idea of how different places, different cultures, different backgrounds can really help shaping things for the better, hopefully. And with that, I am completely open to what you want to ask, if you have some more questions left. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Speaking of diversity, I'm wondering about the situation in Switzerland. Mass surveillance has one in China, it's one in the UK, it's one in France, Poland, Hungary, and Turkey. How are you doing in Switzerland?
Well, there's the hidden part about which I cannot talk because I don't know about it, because it's hidden. And I'm not a secret agent, I promise. There is, of course, and that is, by the way, thank you for that question, because it helps me saying something. That's another added value of actually being in several places, because culturally, the understanding of data, the understanding of what privacy means, the understanding of what it means, that's me and it's only me. It's not the business of everyone else. The understanding for that is very different between US and Europe, and I would even say it's very different in different countries in Europe. And so again, if you develop a global company, you cannot just come with the Silicon Valley understanding of what privacy is, and here we don't care about it because we see very much the added value of technology most of the time. But you cannot develop a global product if you are not aware that other people think differently about it over there. And yeah, so there is a strong resistance, but it's, for instance, very different with the type of resistance that, again, the French use. I always use the antagonism between French and Swiss. It's not an antagonism, but a difference. And I'm from the French part, so I love the French people anyway. So, but in France, there is often the idea that there has to be top-down regulation for things. It's a very top-down country anyway. In Switzerland, we have very much the opposite. We are actually not top-down at all. We don't even have a president. Well, actually, we have one, but it's only honorary. We have a government of 7 people that have the same power. We don't even have one that has more power than anybody else. So we are exactly the country that does not want and does not recognize power in the hands of a single person, but believes firmly in a consensus, and secondly, in, to some extent, the collective wisdom of the citizens. And so if you come with, whatever product to Switzerland and to France, and literally they are next to each other, it's just like driving from San Diego to Tijuana, you get 2 completely sets of experiences and of experiments that you can run. And in Switzerland, we are not very restrictive, by far not as much as France, for instance, but we are certainly much more aware of the questions of security and privacy and data security than the US, for instance. And this comes also, and has to be put in perspective, because of banks. In a way, the whole history of private banking in Switzerland was based on the fact that no question asked. It's basically Las Vegas, What happens in Switzerland stays in Switzerland. Well, it has changed slightly, but it's still part of the culture that we do not just want to openly share everything, everywhere, to everyone. And that's why, for instance, one of the, I think, most used encrypted email software, ProtonMail, is actually coming out of Switzerland. That's why Switzerland has even data centers in old caverns they have built in the mountains during the Second World War because they were afraid of the Germans. And they use that as a place and say, hey, nobody has access to there. The only thing they can do is to basically explode the mountain, you know? So it's a half answer. It's a long half answer to your question, but I don't know the other half. Yes, please.
Given that you're encouraging people to try out entrepreneurship and things in Switzerland, but Switzerland has some of the strictest immigration laws, how do you recommend if someone wanted to start something in Switzerland actually going about doing that?
You said one of the most restrictive what?
One of the strictest immigration policies.
Immigration. You know, immigration is a. It's like in the U.S., frankly. You know, if you're Latino, I mean, as terrible as it sounds, if you're Latino in the U.S., too bad for you. If you're from Yugoslavia or whatever, Africa in Switzerland, too bad for you. In the US, if you're from Switzerland, or if you're from Germany, or if you're from Japan, or if you're from any of these countries and you have the right expertise, you get your visa. In Switzerland, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. You know, pragmatism at the end prevails in our two countries. Despite what sort of votes there are, what sort of government is in place, whatever, you know. Yes, exactly. But at the end, in both countries, I think, in particular in these two, actually, pragmatism wins.
So as long as you show them the money, they're fine with it.
No, the competence. The competence.
Oh, that is metaphorical money, so.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, it also makes it possible for the young student coming out of Stanford to get a job at Google in Zurich. Google has not had...
American companies.
Especially the American companies, of course.
That's almost true.
Yeah.
They drag you in from the back.
I'm not really, I was actually...
He graduated from a Stanford PhD, gave up his U.S. citizenship, and moved to Zurich. He had joined Canadian U.S. and gave up his U.S.
You don't even have to drop it.
You don't have to give it that. At the end, it becomes a tax issue.
Yeah, that's why he gave it up. And also political reasons that he gave.
Sorry, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I was actually thinking along the lines of not being an employee though, so if you wanted to try and, I guess there's no way around that, because it wouldn't be hard, well, relatively speaking, coming out of Stanford or MIT or another school, it would be terribly difficult to get a job at Google and either start here and then transfer to Zurich or go directly to Zurich. If you wanted to actually start a company in Zurich, you would have to go about getting a visa and be an employee for
completely
X
feasible.
number of years first.
It's completely feasible. And you know what? The great advantage? There's only 7 million of us. No, I mean, really. I mean, it's an incredible advantage. Just think about it. Our state secretary, he takes the train. You can meet him in the train. You can talk to him. There is no bodyguards. I've had several presidents of Switzerland here. They never, ever, ever have any type of police with them. You can truly meet them. I can call any single president of any Swiss university, and you can do that as well. You might end up with the executive assistant that says, "Oh, we're so sorry, we can't give you the appointment right now, but can we have that maybe tomorrow afternoon?" I promise you can do that. So there's the official side. There is, of course, regulations in place. But if you come with the right idea, and if you talk to the right people, and I'm happy to help you if you have a specific idea there, and I don't take any percentage, so it's even free, you know. Try it. I can't guarantee, but if you don't try, you don't have the answer, and the chance of getting through is actually quite big, especially if you come with a great idea.
If you don't try, the answer's already no.
Exactly. Have a question? Well, if not, since I didn't talk about chocolate, and since you all need energy, I brought you some chocolate. Yes. So I hope we can share that for the end of the meeting. I didn't want to show it at the beginning, but I didn't want you to bribe you to stay, you know.
Or for people who were watching live and like.
Well, sorry for you guys, but come and visit swissnex.